Hi, I'm Nick Schultz at the American Enterprise Institute. I'm pleased to be joined today by Congressman Fred Upton of Michigan. Congressman, thank you for
Fred,
being
it's
here.
always Fred.
Fred, it's good to see you. You're the new chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. You have a pretty broad portfolio of things, so I want to talk to you about a few topics today. First up, healthcare. You're in favor of Republican efforts to repeal Obamacare, but the practical reality is that the president is still the White House, Democrats control the Senate. Odds of a repeal are unlikely even if it passes the House. So why push for a repeal?
Well, a couple things. This is more than symbolic. We will have the votes when this takes up to repeal it. I'm convinced that not only will every Republican vote to repeal, but we'll have a significant number of Democrats that will vote to repeal as well. There are 13, remember this bill passed in March of 2010 by 7 votes. So switch 4, it goes the other way. So there'll be a number of Democrats who, when Speaker Pelosi had a 78 vote margin, will still want to vote no, and I think that they will. So we'll have the votes to pass it. I don't think we're going to be too far away from the votes required to actually have a 2/3 vote, in essence, to override a presidential veto. It'll put pressure on the Senate. I spoke with Senator Leader McConnell last week. He's excited about our efforts because ultimately I think they will have a vote, and who knows, they may have a majority in the Senate to also repeal it, as we will have a majority certainly in the House. But the issue's not going to go away. We're going to come back, and through hearings and through legislative initiatives, we'll look at things like the individual mandate. You know, I'll bet that there'll be a number of Democrats who vote against the Republicans on repealing it, but in fact will say, you know what, that plank on the insisting upon the individual mandate to purchase insurance, we'll vote to take that out too.
But some critics would say if you take out just that piece,
the
economics of it don't work out. Whether the economics of it work out,
that's a good
even
thing.
with
I wouldn't
the
say
mandate,
critics. I'd say that that's a good thing. But we'll look at, there's another provision that is the 1099 provision. Now, this is more of a Ways and Means provision versus Energy and Commerce. But there was a provision on page 737 in the enacted bill that says that if you, as a business, have a $600 transaction with another business, both sides will have to file a 1099 with the IRS. It's really the first step, I think, to a VAT tax. It generates revenue, ultimately, if you calculate it that way. It was identified, debated last year in the U.S. Senate as well as in the House, but didn't have the votes on either side to take that out. It's going to change this year. We'll have that provision as well. And even though the president and a number of Democrats have said, you know what, that we didn't know that was in there, maybe it shouldn't be in, we didn't have the votes to muster it to take it out. We will now. That'll happen, I'm sure, in the next number of months. And we'll be looking at a number of those planks to then take them out of healthcare, keep this as an issue, particularly for the next 2 years. Much of the bill doesn't kick in for a number of years, as you know, and if we keep it as an issue, as I'm convinced that it will be, not only will we, maybe we'll have another vote to repeal it in the summer. And maybe as members of Congress hear a little bit more from their constituents, maybe that vote will grow a little bit more. And ultimately, I think that we do have a decent chance of getting the bill repealed.
So the strategy is to look for a majority that could override a veto.
Well, 290.
But absent that, to target specific provisions that you're confident you would have a number of Democrats who could join you in reaching an override-proof level of support. So individual mandate or the 1099.
And you'll remember that under President Clinton, the first time the welfare reform bill reached his desk, veto. Second time, veto. Third time, same bill as the first two. Come to the Rose Garden. Let's have a signing ceremony. Look what we did. So ultimately, this is the first step of many, but it's an effort that ultimately I think succeeds.
And then outside of the window of Obamacare per se, what other health care efforts are you thinking about for this year that would, whether they're Republican-backed initiatives or bipartisan initiatives that aren't sort of repeal-oriented but are more forward-looking for what you want to do?
Well, we are just now organizing the committee. In fact, as we talk today, we've not formally organized yet. Don't know who the Democratic ranking members are going to be on the subcommittees. We don't know who their membership is going to be. We know what the ratio will be, number of Republicans to Democrats. But there'll be a number of hearings and initiatives that we pursue, not only in the health subcommittee, but also in oversight and investigations. But I want to call the governors in. The governors, as you look at Medicaid, this is a plan that started decades ago. It was in essence a matching program, 50-50 with the states and the federal government. And one of the things that was in the health care bill is the requirement that the states have to expand their Medicaid eligible population to up to 133% of the poverty level. A lot of states, mine, as we focus on jobs in the economy and how are we possibly going to balance the Michigan state budget, but that's not something that's unusual for most of the states, California, Arizona, et cetera. And yet you've got the feds telling the states they've got to provide more benefits to a larger class of individuals, a wider body. Where are they going to get
steroids, right?
Where are they going to get the money? Are they going to be forced to raise taxes? What are they going to do? So one of the things that we're going to ask early on is to have a number of governors, Republican and Democrat, come in and tell us what they want the federal government to do, what these particularly unfunded mandates are doing to their state treasuries, and suggestions from them in terms of how we can make this program more efficient, perhaps save money for the taxpayer, but really listen to the individual states. And so we're going to have a very busy agenda as we relate to all of the subcommittees within the Energy and Commerce.
Turning to another exciting issue these days is energy and the environment, and specifically the EPA. The EPA, as of this year, is implementing regulations of greenhouse gas emissions, and this is something that you have expressed strong opposition to, the way EPA has gone about doing this. And you're starting to get a little bit of pushback from some Democrats, especially in the Senate. I just want to read one quote to you from the New York Times today from Senator Tom Harkin, who said, "I never defend, I always attack. If Republicans want to repeal EPA regulations and stuff like that, I think we ought to go after them. I say give them rope." So walk me through a little bit of what your thinking is on EPA regulation of greenhouse gas emissions and what specifically you're looking to do.
Well, a couple things. Our focus is on jobs in the economy. We know that as a nation, we are going to need 30 to 40% more electricity before the end of the next decade. We're not prepared. We need to work with utilities. Obviously, we all want a cleaner environment. A lot of us disagree. I mean, as we look at what the House did in the last Congress, cap and trade bill, passed again by 7 votes in the House, switched 4, it goes the other way. Senate, despite in essence a 60-40 majority for most of the 2-year term, were unable to get a bill to the Senate floor for debate. And it's interesting, the bill that Senator Boxer actually helped lead after the Waxman-Markey bill had passed the House, at least in the Waxman-Markey bill, we repealed or did away with the mass EPA decision. We reversed it, struck it. The Boxer bill did not, still allowing EPA to move forward in terms of all of the regulations that they may want to pursue. But at the end of the day, cap and trade was dead because it didn't go to the Senate. Even sort of a lighter cap and trade light or a carbon tax failed to get anywhere close to the votes that they needed to bring it up in the Senate to then try and marry it in a conference between the House and the Senate. But one of the things that we will be doing, and I separated the Energy and Environment Subcommittee into 2 separate subcommittees so we could really focus on the regulations that EPA wants to pursue. They had asked for comment on labeling coal ash as a hazardous waste. Well, can you imagine what that would have done to the coal industry, let alone to the lawyers in terms of settlements, in terms of what coal ash has been used for, streets and highways as well as particle board, all those different things. Would have put an end, I think, to the coal industry in a big way. But you look at ozone standards, greenhouse gas emissions, all of those things. the Clean Air Act called for actually an economic analysis, the impact on jobs in the economy across the country. We haven't seen the evidence of what the proposals would do to jobs in the economy, but that's one of the things that we'll ask for. And you can expect that we'll have a whole number of hearings, not only in the Oversight Investigation Subcommittee as it relates to what EPA might be doing, but also in the Environmental Subcommittee as well. Because we have to be prepared. I am one of the all of the above guys. I support drilling in the Arctic. I support renewables. I support nuclear power, clean coal technology, all of those things. But if you tie a hand behind our back and really impose such burdensome regulations on the industry that they're going to not be able to produce the energy. We've lost 1 in 5 manufacturing jobs across the country the last 3 years. Michigan has been particularly hard hit. Almost half of those jobs have come from Michigan. But if you raise, cap and trade would have raised the energy costs for across the board in the Midwest by 20% almost overnight. We can't allow that to happen and expect to keep the jobs here. They'll go someplace else. They'll go to India, China, who knows where they're going to go, and they will never come back. So that's going to be our focus as it relates to the environment. What is happening to our jobs in the economy? How can we help the industry be able to produce the energy that we need for the country to move forward?
And on EPA specifically, since they're moving this year and starting to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, that there's one proposal. It's not all Democrats actually that are in favor of this. There have been some who've been skeptical of it, Senator Rockefeller and others. There's a proposal for a possible 2-year moratorium on these regulations. Do you support something like that? Do you want something stronger than that?
Well, we're going to look at that. That is for sure. And some of these are now within the courts. It's going to take a little while for the courts to make an ultimate decision. Some would say, well, why are we going to impose all of these additional burdens on business and industry and the utilities when, in fact, if the courts rule a certain way, it'll all be for naught. They may be spending, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on some of these proposals that may be struck. So might it not be better to have wait until the court fight is over to then decide what happens? So that'll be one of the things that is certainly on the front burner. In a bipartisan way, I would say.
One other energy question for you. This has come up. There have been a number of stories in the Washington Post, for example, over the last couple of days that mentioned the so-called light bulb ban.
I knew that's where you're coming.
And this was legislation that you originally supported, but now have expressed some willingness to revisit it. Could you just tell me what you're thinking?
Well, a couple things. The light bulb standard passed on a voice vote. In essence, no one called for a recorded vote. There are a number of members on both sides of the aisle that supported it. And I said early on, months ago, that we would re-examine the issue. What the issue where we are today is that beginning, I want to say in 2012, the old light bulb is going to be not be sold again in the United States. Actually came from the lighting industry. They were, as they have moved to the new light bulbs, they're actually producing them here. They're doing it without mercury. The last light bulb factory, I want to say, closed. I read a story in November or so. But I said early on we would re-examine the issue. We'll do that in the next couple of months, I'm sure. Okay.
The two of my colleagues here today, Ken Green and Steve Hayward, have what I think is a useful way of thinking about energy policy. They call it AA energy policy. By that they mean any laws or regulations should try to ensure abundance and affordability when it comes to energy policy. As you look out this year, Chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, what are the things that you're looking forward to in terms of ensuring greater abundance or affordability in energy? Any laws or rules specifically that you're?
Well, I'll use one right off the bat. I'm a strong nuclear supporter. I sat down last month with the chairman of Toshiba. We know that the French, as well as the Japanese, probably the Chinese as well, can go start to finish on a new nuclear reactor literally in 4 to 5 years, maybe 6. For the United States, it's 10 or 12. Think of the additional costs that have to be incurred because of that additional time. let's take a look at that. Why is it that it takes us so much longer, especially since it was the United States that actually developed nuclear power? So we'll have hearings on that. We'll see if there's something that we can't do with the NRC, particularly as you look at, if you approve a particularly design one place, obviously you have to take in consideration the geographic considerations, but why is it that it takes us 3 times as long or twice as long as other nations? We can reduce the cost dramatically, I think, if we can speed up that timeline. Let's look at coal. Coal is where the United States has a tremendous abundance. I'm a supporter of clean coal technology. Carbon capture and sequestration is an issue that has been kicking around in the Congress for a little while. It's been a bipartisan bill, yet in fact it wasn't included as part of the cap and trade bill that ultimately passed the House. Let's take a look at that to help the coal industry look to the future. Let's look at smart grids. I mean, a whole number of different things, which I think puts us on the path where we can really provide the energy that our nation's going to need. It'll be a big focus.
Final topic for you. You also oversee technology, telecom policy. Had a big bruising fight over the last couple of years on the net neutrality issue. You said that this is going to be one of the, with the FCC recently passing net neutrality, new net neutrality rules. You've indicated that this is one of the first things that you want to tackle. Tell me why you think it's so important and what you plan to do.
Well, George Will, I think, was the one, and I complimented him on this when he said it. He said, most Americans believe that the government doesn't work, but the internet does. So why in the world do we want to put the government in charge of the internet? We are going to pursue this big time. Chairman of the Telco Communication Subcommittee, Greg Walden, we will be having early hearings probably next month on the whole issue of net neutrality. We are going to look at every tool in the toolbox to try and stop this. I would note that there were 95 members of Congress, 95 candidates for Congress, all of which were Democrats who supported net neutrality, and all 95 lost in the last election. As you focus on jobs in the economy, let's let consumers as well as industry figure out where they want to take us with the internet. I like what George Will had to say. I want the free market to work, and if a particular industry or internet sites, whatever, are not working the way that consumers want, let's let the competition play, and consumers will move someplace else. That's what the free market policy is. So we are going to pursue this. My bet is that it will be bipartisan, and at the end of the day, I think that our side will win.
Final question for you, which is, fortunately or not, net neutrality has taken up a lot of the oxygen when it comes to technology and telecom, but it's a huge area, and there are a lot of what I would say are sort of pressing issues that need to be dealt with in, say, privacy or spectrum, a number of different areas. As you look at it, in addition to looking at net neutrality, which you plan to do pretty soon, what else over the coming year are sort of top technology issues that you...
Well, my bet is that we will be able to find some real common ground, particularly with the administration on spectrum. As we look at now the advent of 4G, and we look, to the future, we're going to need that. So we'll have hearings on that. I think you'll probably see some legislation that'll be bipartisan, working hand in hand with really most parties to move a bill. Privacy has been something that's been stalled, a lot of controversy, but certainly we're going to proceed with that issue as well. Universal service. I mean, here's something that was started decades ago, and really to try and help rural areas not have communication, phone service. Well, those days are over, and yet the universal service charge is still, now it's significantly higher than it has been in the past. Where does all the money go? What charge line are we on at the? So we're going to be looking at universal service again, I think in a bipartisan way. So the Telecommunications Subcommittee will be again very active, going back to the days when I used to chair it.
Okay, great. That's all we have time for. My guest today is Congressman Fred Upton from Michigan, the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Fred, thanks so much for
Yeah,
joining me.
Nick, thank you.